This is the North Carolina Rabbit Hole. I'm Jeremy Markovich. Every once in a while, I come across a story that I am not entirely sure what to do with. It's not topical, it's not newsworthy, doesn't really have a clear point, there's no tidy beginning or satisfying ending, it is just a snapshot in time. Earlier this year, I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts when one of the hosts read a story that he had found on Reddit. I don't know if there's a point exactly, but I think it is more of a demonstration of the way people cope in the midst of really hard situations. So, I found the original post, I'll link to it on Blue Sky, and then I had somebody jump in my mentions to tell me that the guy in the story was actually his college buddy, a guy named Brett Sheats. So I got in touch with Brett, gave him a call, and he told me a story on the phone while I was driving in the car. That's why this is going to sound very phone call-y. And the only other thing I'm going to tell you before we begin here is that it's best if you don't know too much before we get going.
My name is Brett Sheats. I live in Washington, D.C. I am a government contractor up here. Yeah, I guess that's who I am, where I am, and what I do right now.
Tell me again this moment that you had on September 11th, 2001.
It was quite an interesting day as someone that, Wake Forest, as you can imagine. The ROTC department at the time was kind of behind the building that is behind the law school. I came into work and I didn't know what was going on. I wasn't listening to the radio. I lived off campus at that point, and I was listening to some music. And so when I got to work, everybody at work at the ROTC department was really stone-faced and like, you need to go to the classroom. And I walked into the classroom and I couldn't see what was on the TV, but all of the military cadre that worked at the ROTC department, the colonel, the majors, captains, all of them were in there. They're just like, sit down, LT. And I'm like, oh my God, am I in trouble? What the hell's going on? And then, I looked what was on TV and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I've had a lot of people ask me how, between seeing what was on the TV screen, how long did it take me sort of to get what was going on and the effect it would have on me? I had only been in the Army for, 3 months or so after I'd graduated from Wake. And it took what seemed like minutes, but was in actuality just mere seconds. It literally took, I would guess, less than 5 seconds for me to make the connection from what I saw on the screen to what that meant for the country, and then kind of what that meant for me personally. And it was, as shocking for me as it was for everyone else, you got to put yourself in that place and time. 2001, the vast majority of my time at Wake, it was the Clinton presidency, it was globalization, the economy was going great. I was there on ROTC scholarship, but I thought there's not going to be any wars. Our economies are too interlinked. It doesn't make any sense that there would be these big conflicts. I'm going to spend my 4 years in the military up in Alaska and mountain bike and ski and do all these things I love to do, and it'll be a great experience, and I'll serve my country for a little bit, and that'll be it. And it literally just took me a couple seconds to be like, that future no longer exists. That is not going to happen. And I didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but I knew that it was going to be radically different than what perhaps I thought. I was there for a little while. The colonel came by my desk. He's like, Lieutenant Sheats, I'm going to have you go home, get your affairs in order. You might be leaving us early. I was like, I have no idea. I'm still processing the fact that my life is about to be so utterly different. And, okay, so, I call my dad. He told me to get us some money out of the ATM and go fill my car up with gas. It was eerie. It was a beautiful day. Gorgeous, gorgeous day. I remember that. But, there was just no one around. And so I drove to the BP station. I went in, and there was just one dude back to me, jeans on, the white T-shirt, sweaty, tan, orange hat on, and just an old dude. He looked like, if you were going to ask, if you went to Winston-Salem and you're like, I wonder where to get the best barbecue sandwich, you'd be like, that's the guy to ask. Literally, he was North Carolina personified. And he was having a conversation already with the cashier. I think he was sort of leaning on the counter. Looked like he'd probably talked to the guy a million times, got cigarettes from him, whatever it may be. That's when I walked up, that's what I heard him say. That is what happened in New York today. I do not think it'll have the effect on America that the death of Dale Earnhardt did.
Okay, I'm going to repeat this because this is kind of crucial, and also it might be a little bit hard to hear through the phone. But Brett Sheats, in line at a gas station on September 11th, 2001, hears the man in front of him say this, quote, "As bad as what happened today in New York, I just don't think it'll have the effect on America that the death of Dale Earnhardt did." Back to the story.
And I heard him say that, and I just remember just being jaw-dropping. It was jaw-dropping. Even at the time, it didn't even take me any time to be like, that is profoundly one of the most insane things I've ever heard a human being say in my life.
I mean, that day was like traumatizing for obviously a lot of people, but it always strikes me that people never quite react in the way that they're quote supposed to, right? Like, yeah. I don't know. I think a lot about that because, like, you know, like when you look at it later, like, how could you possibly say something like that? But like, I don't know. Like, that's a lot to process. He's working something out while you're working something out, and you two happen to collide at like the counter at the BP station off of University Boulevard.
So it is. It's so nuts. The question I hear the most was like, was he serious? Which is honestly the most logical question to ask. And I have to be honest with you, he seemed dead serious. Now, as you said, it was early afternoon on 9/11. We didn't even know if things were over. There were a lot of rumors that things were still going on. Other things were happening. And I think he was trying to process. And who knows, maybe he talked NASCAR every day with that cashier at the BP. And you know, that was their shared lexicon, and that's the way that he was trying to deal with it. But he did seem dead serious. He was not being sarcastic. And while I would disagree with his ranking of those events in history, I think he just wasn't ready. Who knows?
You know, if you had to not pinpoint that specific day, but that specific year, and this is just me just kind of trying to process it, because like I remember when Dale Earnhardt died, and like I wasn't even like a big NASCAR fan, but I knew who Dale Earnhardt was, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
My mom knew. It's always the test I use, right? My mom knew that Dale Earnhardt died, even if she didn't really know that much about who he was. Those moments are rarer and rarer now these days. You think like when Kobe passed away is something somewhat similar, but not on the level that everybody, you know, when you tune in, like, you have limited places to get your news, and in those places, it all led with that. Those moments are fewer and far between.
You heard this story, and you're in Winston-Salem, and then, like, okay, fast forward, kind of take me from part 1 to part 2 here.
Yeah, so it was 24, 25 months later, so, you know, late fall 2003. From North Carolina, I went to training, I went to jump school, and then I went to my unit, which was an airborne infantry battalion up in Alaska. I trained with my unit there, got to know them, and then in fall 2003, we flew to the Afghan-Pakistani border. We were in Border Operating Base Salerno, which is just outside of Khost, Afghanistan, right on the border, in the area known as Waziristan, which was kind of cut in half when, you know, the Western powers created Afghanistan and Pakistan. So we're in Waziristan, and we're there for a week and a half, and nothing's happening. And none of us had ever been in combat. We were all young folks in our 20s, and we didn't know what to expect, what that was going to be like, how sudden it would happen, what it would feel like when it happened. And so there was a lot of trepidation. There was a lot of anxiety. In the middle of the night, one night, about a week and a half in, they wake us up, and they're like, hey, we have reliable intelligence Al-Qaeda's on this hill here. We need you guys to go in Humvees and take that hill and be ready to, you know, see what happens. You know, kind of not really sure what's going to happen when you get there, but, you know, we're sending you all out. So at that point, you know, my sergeant gets the guys together, and I'm like, okay, hey, Sergeant Ferguson, make sure everything's good to go. Check everybody, check all the equipment, make everything's good. Let me know if there's any problems. I'm like, all right, just get everybody together. I just want to, sort of a meeting of the minds, just say a few words before we leave. And at that moment, I'm still being like, what does that, I don't know why I am so programmed to believe that I have to say something. Remember, I'm the second lieutenant, right? I am the new guy who is nominally in charge, but really Sergeant Ferguson had 6 years in the military. He was in charge. I was like, I still think it's sort of my job to sort of say something. And it really wasn't until like 30 seconds before that I sort of came up with, I looked around, I sort of saw what was going on. I realized that this wasn't about me. This was about the team. This was about all the preparation for months and years we'd put into this. And it wasn't about me needing to amp them up. They already had everything they needed. And that's where I sort of just came up with the, instead of zigging, I zagged. I said, no, what they don't need is more motivation. They already understand the motivation. What they need is just to kind of be brought back to earth a little bit. They're probably going nuts in their heads right now. And that's when I just came up with the idea of telling them about Dale.
Just a quick time out here to clarify something. So Brett, talking to all of his fellow soldiers before they go out on their first combat patrol in Afghanistan, he gets them together, and to loosen the tension in the room, he tells them about the man he met on September 11th, 2001, and tells them what he said about Dale Earnhardt, and then tells everybody in the room, quote, let's go do it for Dale.
So now it's like, okay, so you're like, you have like a rallying cry, which is like, do it for Dale, like yep. Going out.
Which is just like ridiculous, but also not that ridiculous. Like first off, plenty of guys in that unit that love Dale Earnhardt, love NASCAR, right? That like it was a bit of a rallying cry that was unique, that was kind of to ourselves, but also had that link back to 9/11 that the echoes of that day are kind of embedded in that story, and those guys to this day still remind me about it. They still laugh about it because they're just like, that was nuts, sir. Like that came out of nowhere. And I'm like, yeah, that was the point.
This is gonna sound totally random, but when I was maybe 20 something, and I was a photographer in West Virginia, and I would have to go on perp walks where the sheriff would walk them from the courthouse to the jail. It's a terrible day for them, no matter what they've done, and their heads are always down. And there was another photographer who every single time would say, without fail, do you think Pete Rose deserves to be in the Hall of Fame? And it was such a non sequitur that he knew that people would react to it somehow. It snapped them out of wherever headspace they were, and they would shoot a weird, confused look. And ethically, I think that's kind of bad, if you're a journalist. But one time, one guy reacted, and he was answering every question, and then he shouted that question, and the guys were, do you think Pete Rose should be the Hall of Fame? He's like, hell yeah, it's a travesty, he's not. So one time it actually worked, but it's the same thing. It's kind of ridiculous, but it puts you in a different space maybe than you were before, especially when you got something life or death or, deadly serious that you have to go out and do.
That was exactly the purpose. And, whether or not it was successful, by the time, we had a long drive ahead of us. I don't think we got to that hill for an hour or so, but it cut the tension there. And whether or not it was, it didn't need to last all the way until whatever was going to happen on that hill, which, by the way, there was no one on the hill. There was no firefight that night. Nothing happened. But I was I need to cut the tension somehow just right at this moment. Whether it means it breaks them to think, oh shit, I forgot my flashlight. Oh shit, I forgot this. Whatever it was, I wanted to just jar them for a moment, and whether or not it was successful, I don't know, but they still remember it. So I guess it was successful in some way.
Yeah. It's the most interesting 9/11 story of things that happened on 9/11 that I've heard. Other than I think there's a story. There's a really well reported story about a guy who bowled a 300 game on 9/11.
Oh yeah, I've read that story, and I read an interview with that guy. As you can imagine, this story has made me extremely interested about sort of non-traditional 9/11 stories. Not to try to devalue the whatever one could think of as a normal 9/11 story or a 9/11 story from survivors or folks in New York or D.C. or Pennsylvania. And those stories are just wildly important for us as a people. But it is these stories sort of on the fringe now that I have this intense interest in.
You know, it's been almost 25 years since that happened. I don't know. I feel like it was an awful day, but like the grief or the importance or whatever, it's weird to watch that kind of pass from I remember being there to almost like a historical thing. Like I have to think back to just sort of like what else I was doing. Like I don't remember every detail. It's starting to move into this weird thing about I don't know, like World War II stories, you know, where awful things happened during World War II, but they've kind of crossed into history to some degree, and it's like I don't think this is obviously there yet, but it's weird to watch it go in that direction.
Yeah, I think it's really natural for folks to be overwhelmed by the horror of it, you know, immediately, and then in the years, years following. I remember it wasn't until a couple weeks after it happened that they started calling it 9/11. And I remember being like, oh, so now it's we've got a shorthand way of saying it now. It was September 11th until it became 9/11, like a couple weeks later on the news. And I was like, you know, that's how this is how these things start to change. And like it didn't have to be so formally called anymore. We had our first nickname for the day. And I think that's very normal. That like with time, people start to see it's a very black and white thing to start. And then with time, it softens. They see color. They see nuance. You get, you know, in today's sort of insane cycle, you immediately, like within hours or days, you know, whether it's, I don't even know if 4chan still exists or whatever it is, you start to see the instantaneous, you know, hot takes. Back then, hot takes didn't happen that fast, right? Hot takes happened, it took months, it took weeks, months. And like, this was the beginning, you know, sort of the end, I guess I would say, the end of an era where it took time to process things. It took time for it to be okay to talk about things that maybe had a humorous bent. And I think this story, even though this story is not cruel or mean or belittling to anyone, or it is sort of a humorous or a unusual side of it. And that used to take a long time. It doesn't take a long time now.
I think this is the last thing I'll say. I feel like I've heard a lot of like absurd stories, and this one's like, yeah, but it also like hits like 15 different things, and it's like I'm thinking about it, you know, like I don't quite have it worked out yet. Like you've opened the portal into something that's like just kind of gets you thinking a lot. So
yeah, I will tell you that I have told this story, and it has the best word I can say is that it has bombed. I've told this story, and people did not feel comfortable giving themselves the room to laugh, giving themselves the room to chuckle on its absurdity. They just simply, they heard 9/11 and they had been trained to like, there's no way to look at this other than this is horrific, deep despair. I cannot respond in any other way. And I've told it a couple times earlier on and saw that people did not appreciate it, did not see the interesting humor, absurdity of it. And I've since then, you know, for a long time, I was very careful with who I told it to. Certainly in a place like DC or New York, you have to be extremely careful because you might run into people who lost someone or know someone that died in that day, and it's tough for them to see anything humorous about that day whatsoever. Now, as we come with time, and especially as you know, I think that it's easier. It's easier. People see it once again. They give themselves the permission to laugh about the absurdity of something like that. But also, as time continues to go on, this story will be just like a moment. Like if you get to someone young enough, both 9/11 and Dale Earnhardt are devoid of any understanding, and it becomes a meaningless story. So it's firmly of its time, but it needed a little time to kind of cook or to ferment before people were willing to kind of hear it. And I think you're right. There's no other moment or story in my life like this, and I seriously doubt there ever will be.
Many thanks to Brett Sheats and the Shutdown Fullcast. If you like this story and you want to hear more like it, you can go to ncrabbithole.com. That is where you can find my weekly newsletter. It is free if you want it to be. Again, ncrabbithole.com. And if you like this podcast, please do all the things that you do when you like podcasts, like give us a good rating, a good review, share it with your friends, do all this stuff. Would really appreciate that. It really helps people find the show. This has been the North Carolina Rabbit Hole. I'm Jeremy Markovich, and I'll see you next time.